It had long been evening outside, but the light from one of the windows of the student dormitory illuminated the dark street. Frantically clutching his cell phone in his hands, Michael could not believe that he had just received a message from his girlfriend with information about the end of their relationship. He made his last attempts to establish communication, typing message after message and talking about how good they would be together, but this did not change the girl's decision. In the end, Michael saw that she had blocked his contact. Noticing Michael's strange behavior, his roommates asked if he was okay, to which the young man replied something not entirely intelligible. But a moment later, Michael suddenly hit the table with his fist as hard as he could. Without saying a word, he stood up and quickly left the room, dropping his chair and half-eaten Chinese noodles. His neighbors already realized that their friend had been abandoned once again. This time, it was one of the beauties of the institute, Veronica, who broke off relations with Michael. Meanwhile, Michael had already managed to reach the place where they had intended to meet and discuss everything, before the girl sent him a message about the breakup. Here, he was still lucky to meet the dazzling Veronica. Remembering the joyful beginning of their relationship, the young man, holding out a bag of goodies, began to persuade the girl not to end things. He claimed that he was ready to change if something about him didn't suit her. But the merciless girl did not leave him a chance, saying that she held no grudge against Michael. She simply realized that her ex-boyfriend needed more and wanted to get along with him. Such a statement greatly hurt the young man, who would have been ready to accept his imperfection, but could not believe that she had given in to another, and not the best, option, who had already managed to deceive Veronica several times in the past. At this time, a luxurious, expensive car pulled up to the side of the road. The side window on the passenger side rolled down, and the man sitting behind the wheel smugly invited the girl to sit in the cabin. Veronica did not keep him waiting and finally told Michael that it was better for them not to meet again and not communicate at all. After these words, the girl got into the car, and the car quickly sped off, taking with it the last hopes of the young man and leaving him completely alone on the streets of the night city. After thinking for a few minutes, Michael threw away the goodies he had bought for Veronica and walked away. He walked around the city at night for a long time and finally decided to go to the supermarket, washing down his grief with mineral water. The young man thought about why girls generally don't appreciate the sincerity of guys. He didn't know where to take out his anger and squeezed the empty bottle with all his might. Rage and anger literally overwhelmed his entire being, and Michael decided that he would no longer behave politely and follow the girl's lead, but would make them run after him. And then something happened. Some voice from outside first said that the connection to the master system was completed. Then a transparent screen appeared before the young man's eyes, on which his name was written. Information about the absence of enhancements was displayed, and the account balance was listed as $90 billion. Shocked by what was happening, the young man tried to touch this screen, and at that same moment, he heard an indignant female voice calling him a pervert and pointing out the need to watch his hands. Michael, who had not yet come to his senses, tried to figure out what was happening around him, and finally, he saw the dissatisfied face of the girl who was now saying that the young man was not all right in his head. The voiceover then announced the name and age of this girl and also declared that her relationship to Michael was minus 50 points. Until now, Michael, unaware of anything, simply stood there, his mouth open in surprise. The voice continued, saying that he needed to spend money on girls, and as soon as the girl's attitude rating toward Michael reached plus 96 points, she would become his fan. From what he heard, the young man experienced an even greater shock. He could not believe that, just like that, he was given 90 billion and told to spend it. Meanwhile, the voice asked whether to launch the game, warning that this money could only be spent on girls. But after the unknown voice added that the master would get back a tenth of what he spent on the girls, and that additional skills would appear, the young man's answer was already predictable. He immediately set his first goal. Putting on his most good-natured face, Michael told the girl not to be angry about his behavior, and, in order to compensate for her bad mood, he was ready to buy whatever she wanted. While the girl listened to Michael's words, the voiceover announced the successful activation of the game and said that the reward for completing the action would also be gain points, which could be spent on improving one's strength, dexterity, and spirit. Having heard the cherished words about shopping, the girl didn't really believe that such a nondescript guy had any money, but she played along, with a hint of caution and humor. Michael examined the slender body of Angelica, who was listed at the institute as the first beauty of the art department. Without hesitation, he answered that the girl should just try to ask and not throw around words out of ignorance. After these words, the girl said that she wanted to treat all the students of her faculty and therefore needed financial help. She thought to herself that this beggar was simply trying not to disgrace himself in the eyes of others, and she needed to disgrace him. But before she had time to finish her thought, she received a notification on her phone that $1,000 had been transferred to her account. This forced Angelica to voice the amount, which attracted the attention of the supermarket visitors. Meanwhile, Michael stood there and thought that $1,000 was not such a big amount. The pleasantly surprised girl concluded that she had come across a real rich man. Such a fat wallet definitely could not be missed. Angelica had already formed an action plan. Turning Michael's phone toward her, she quickly added herself to him as a friend on social media with swift movements of her fingers. Then, almost getting close to Michael's face, who had not yet gotten used to his new role, the girl said that she wanted to take a walk with him, to the same place where she would see how long he would last. The evening city lived its own vibrant nightlife. Heading to one of the most expensive boutiques, Angelica said that she was not a materialistic girl at all, but wanted to understand how serious the young man was toward her. Michael only thought that the more money she spent, the greater his own winnings would be. So the words about seriousness and commercialism didn't really bother him. Michael said out loud that he was ready to do anything for Angelica, and she could choose any items without denying herself anything. They were already inside the boutique when the newly rich man, looking at women's handbags, suddenly heard a very familiar voice behind him. It was Veronica who, standing in front of her old new boyfriend, was trying on a new handbag. Michael looked carefully at the face of the one who had just a couple of hours ago exchanged him for another and abandoned him in the middle of a dark street. Michael loved this girl, and notes of true sadness now crept into his soul. Noticing the young man's attention toward the other girl, Angelica quickly reminded him that now was probably not the time, since his ex was here. To which the young man replied that this could not interfere with him at all, and the girl could calmly continue to choose things for herself. Satisfied with the successful circumstances, Angelica turned to the consultant with a question about the availability of a fashionable handbag for sale, which had been the subject of everyone's attention at the spring show of new models. The consultant responded positively, saying that the last such handbag was now being tried on by another girl, pointing in Veronica's direction. At that moment, Veronica noticed Michael and, thinking that he was continuing to pursue her, decided to teach him a lesson, disgracing him in front of everyone in the store for being a beggar. Turning to her boyfriend, whose name was Mason, she asked if he remembered that she would have a birthday soon. Mason noted with surprise that the girl had celebrated her birthday quite recently. To which the resourceful Veronica stated that then it was a holiday according to the lunar calendar, and now she would celebrate her birthday according to the solar one. Mason, who found himself in a hopeless situation, began to say that he did not like materialistic girls and asked if Veronica was with him now for the sake of money. This statement took the girl by surprise, and she could not find what to answer. At that moment, Angelica approached her from behind and carefully took the purse in her hand. Taking advantage of the girl's confusion, Angelica took the handbag with a light and agile movement, and Michael, without wasting any time, paid for the purchase at that very moment. While the satisfied girl was enjoying the new item, the voiceover announced 3 times that she was adding plus 20 points to her favorability rating. Michael also beamed with happiness, having immediately received plus 60 points just for buying some kind of handbag. He decided that at this rate, it would not be difficult to achieve the desired result. At the same time, he mentally noted that his personal financial benefit from the transactions could have been greater. Looking at the homely-looking rich man in the face of Michael, the store consultants recalled the words of their director, that one should not be biased toward people based only on their appearance. Veronica, who had lost her purse, stood with her eyes lowered to the floor. She looked in fascination at the simple guy gazing at handbags and again came to the idea that this jackpot should not be missed. Approaching Michael, she gently grabbed his hand and began to thank him for his generosity, calling him dear, which the young man did not expect and found a little embarrassing. Veronica looked at this whole scene with tears in her eyes, saying that this young man's behavior had crossed all boundaries. Veronica pushed Michael away and rushed out of the store, but he mentally noted that this was just the beginning. At that moment, a familiar voice announced that Veronica is the second object, and currently, her attitude toward the master is -10. Listening to this, Michael watched as Mason took off from his seat and ran after the girl, rushing away from the boutique. None of the participants in the action heard how Michael was promised a reward of 20 gain points when Veronica's attitude reached 96 points. Angelica, who did not miss her chance, clung to the young man, asking where they would go now. Michael, who had gotten a taste of the game, replied, "Only where I can spend money," since he would never believe that one handbag would be enough for a girl in one boutique. Michael pointed out the most expensive dress in another, then the most elegant and incredibly expensive jewelry, and everywhere, he invariably paid with the very card that appeared to him after agreeing to participate in the game. Being in some kind of positive state of shock, Angelica of course did not hear how the voiceover announced that her disposition toward the master had improved by another 5 points. Buying new, expensive perfume? Another 5 points. Then the cosmetics department? Again, 5 more. Numerous clothing boutiques also added favorability points. Finally, the girl herself said that she'd probably had enough this time, because all this simply wouldn't fit into her small apartment. To which Michael simply replied that this was not a problem, since he would immediately buy her a new, spacious apartment. However, the girl suddenly said that this would somehow be too much, because this was their first meeting and she had just wanted to joke. Michael was immediately informed by the system that the girl's favorability had dropped by -5 points. This forced the young man to be distracted from searching for an apartment. He came to the conclusion that the application to purchase one was indeed unnecessary and had only frightened the girl. He quickly found himself approaching Angelica and naming her full details, the department where she studied, her favorite color, zodiac sign, favorite food, and favorite movie, which left her completely confused. Then he said that he was very passionate about her, which made him behave so recklessly. Having finished his speech, he turned to the store consultant and asked to open an account in Angelica's name, where he would deposit $50,000 and asked that they offer her only the best the next time she visited the store. Again, he turned to Angelica, saying that in this way, he hoped to make amends for his bad joke about buying her an apartment. Blushing from everything that happened, the girl stood frozen for a moment, unable to say anything. Michael, still playing his role, came close to her and whispered in her ear that if she was embarrassed by his gifts, then she could offer him something in return. This had the desired effect. The girl finally came to life, pushing the young man away and jokingly calling him a pervert. Immediately, the system announced, plus 30 points to the girl's favor. Michael, not noticing the admiring glances of the consultants, who were literally ready to throw themselves at him, concluded that if you're rich, then you can get away with anything. Angelica suddenly asked why the young man shouldn't think about himself after he had bought her so many gifts. To which Michael simply and without a twinge of conscience replied that he didn't have money to buy things for himself. The dazzling Angelica gently took the young man by the hand and, saying that now it was her turn to give gifts, pulled him along with her, looking at him with an alluring gaze. First, the girl took him to boutiques with men's clothing. Then they started doing the young man's hair. And so, after all these transformations, a completely different person appeared on the street. Angelica enthusiastically noted how attractive this young man really was, and Michael himself said that he now felt somehow strange and not very confident. To which Angelica, approaching the young man, said in a gentle voice and with no less gentle movements, that there was nothing strange, and that they made a very beautiful couple. But then she let go of his hand and began to move away, throwing a goodbye kiss. The girl said that they would see each other later and that she was so happy today that she almost decided she had fallen in love. Michael was then told that, according to the results of today's meeting, Angelica's disposition had become plus 68 points. There were fewer and fewer illuminated windows in the dorm. Opening the door to his room, Michael entered, shining like a new cent coin, whose appearance made his neighbors surprised. When asked what he had been doing all this time, Michael replied that he went on a date with Angelica. To this, his neighbors began vying with each other to express their disbelief that he had not yet settled things with Veronica, but was already dating Angelica, who, moreover, was the first beauty of her faculty. Then one of the guys approached Michael and said that Angelica was not a girl on his level and that he didn't have enough finances for her. He was immediately awarded a sarcastic thank you from Michael for his friendly advice. After listening to his friend, the young man began to read new messages. One was from Veronica, who wrote that she had chosen Mason only because her mother was now sick and she really needed money. Without hesitation, Michael transferred her $10,000. At the same moment, in the women's building of the dormitory, an exclamation of surprise sounded, so loud that it was heard far beyond the dorm. That was the surprise of Veronica, who stated that as soon as she mentioned money, Michael immediately transferred the required amount. Her friend asked if this was the same Michael with whom Veronica had broken up, to which she answered positively and added that she needed to get rid of Mason, who couldn't even buy her a bag, and take Michael into circulation. She began quickly typing one message after another on her cell phone. She asked where the young man got so much money, what kind of relationship he had with Angelica, and whether he still had any feelings for her. Meanwhile, Michael, having heard the system announcement that +5 had been added to Veronica's disposition, began to think that Angelica turned out to be not as selfish as Veronica. Deciding not to answer the girl for now, the young man began to look for places where he could still spend money on girls. And so, he found what he needed, an online broadcast by a famous blogger named Miranda, who accepted financial assistance for herself. Michael's joy knew no bounds, because he had found the perfect place to spend a lot of money, which he did not hesitate to do. Having seen the transfer from a user under the name Lone Wolf, Miranda, not yet familiar with the amount, sent him words and a token of gratitude. But when the actual figure was shown on the screen, not only the blogger girl was shocked, but so was everyone else watching her live stream. The comments from the audience came quickly, noting the sudden appearance of a rich man and begging him to throw them some money too. But instead of responding to those meaningless comments, Michael decided it would be nice to make another transfer and press the appropriate button on his phone. Meanwhile, in the office of the online broadcasting company where Miranda worked, a real commotion began. The project manager literally flew into the boss's office without knocking, shouting with a wild expression on his face that some rich guy had just transferred $1 million to Miranda. The boss's reaction came quickly. He suggested that it was either fraud or money laundering. Meanwhile, other girls who also broadcast from the company began to vie with each other, trying to message the Lone Wolf, telling each other how this rich man had just transferred $1 million to Miranda. Miranda herself couldn't believe that she had received such an amount. The director rushed in, giving frantic gestures to take this rich viewer into circulation. But Miranda stated she wouldn't let such a goldfish go anywhere. After blowing a kiss, the girl told the Lone Wolf to send her a private message so she could give him her well-deserved gratitude. But the Lone Wolf didn't respond to this, or any of the following messages, because Michael had long since fallen into a sound, healthy sleep. A new, clear, and warm day arrived, and the first rays of the sun illuminated the walls of the men's dormitory. Having woken up, Michael lazily read the messages in the general chat, where everyone was buzzing about how a certain rich man had appeared in online broadcasts the previous day. While the young man was washing his face and brushing his teeth, he noted that his transfers to Miranda had no effect. There was no notification about her being added to the system, nor about the accrual of favorability points. He figured that maybe the system required a personal meeting for the girl to be recognized. Just as he was thinking about this, he discovered a huge number of messages from various girls offering to meet up. However, almost immediately, his attention was diverted by the commotion his dorm mates were making as they rushed out of the room. Curious, he asked what was going on. They explained that they were hurrying to an open lesson so they could get the best seats, to fully enjoy Jessica's beauty. She was an incredibly attractive girl whom literally all the guys at school dreamed of. Michael also remembered Jessica in great detail, the one every guy dreamed about. Jessica was famous not just for her looks. She was very educated, cultured, and the chairman of the student association. Her musical talent on the piano left no one indifferent. She also excelled in dynamic sports, had studied ballet, and was the state champion in fencing. While Michael was turning over in his head all the merits of this university beauty, he was noticed by students sitting nearby, who assumed he had transferred from another group since they had not seen him here before. But the young man didn't care about them. He was thinking about how to establish contact with Jessica, who constantly kept only in her own company, and for 3 years, no one had managed to even just talk to her. Then, Veronica and her neighbor noticed him. The neighbor, whose name was Inga, noted that Michael had dressed up well, probably to impress Veronica. At that same moment, it was announced that +10 points had been added to Veronica's disposition. Glancing sideways toward the girl, Michael noted to himself that Veronica was really some kind of superficial woman, since her position improved just because he had dressed up a little. But throwing away those unnecessary thoughts, the young man tried to focus on how he could meet and add Jessica to the system. He was suddenly distracted by loud exclamations from the left side of the audience. It was one of the guys, suffering from excessive self-confidence and arrogance, who loudly declared that he was about to get Jessica's phone number. Jessica's attention was also attracted by this nonsense, which made her very surprised. But she didn't even have time to say a word before a self-confident guy, whose name was Greg, was already standing nearby. He invited the girl to get to know each other better and exchange contacts. His unceremonious actions only confused Jessica, but her roommate, who was nearby, was visibly displeased by Greg's behavior. Greg, without wasting any time, moved closer and closer to Jessica, saying that they would make a good couple and should start dating. But suddenly, with a sharp movement, someone's hand pulled the guy away from the girl. It was Jessica's roommate, Kate, who raised her hand over the guy's head, warning him not to dare come close to her friend. Watching the sharp end of a pen hover above his head, Greg began hastily making excuses, saying he just wanted to join the student association and that Kate had misunderstood him. She replied that it was the stupidest excuse she'd ever heard and sent the failed gentleman away. But not even a few seconds had passed before the attention of both girls was attracted by another voice, asking Jessica to add him as a friend on social media. They were both surprised. It was Michael, who had already prepared his phone for exchanging contact information. Kate noted aloud that this guy was at least cute, and sarcastically inquired whether he also wanted to join the student association. But Michael, as honestly and openly as possible, said that he wasn't concerned with any of that student stuff. This prompted Kate to ask why. Then, he needed Jessica's contact at all. Delaying the moment of his answer, the young man first said that it should be obvious to everyone. But without much of a pause, he added that he just wanted to date Jessica. Jessica immediately blushed and didn't know how to respond to such blunt honesty. Moreover, everyone in the audience was shocked by Michael's directness. The result of this frankness was not long in coming and was extremely unexpected for everyone, when the unapproachable Jessica suddenly took out her phone and said that she wouldn't mind trying. Veronica looked angrily at everything that was happening, and Inga, standing next to her, added fuel to the fire by asking whether Michael should be her personal dog and run after her all the time. Meanwhile, Michael, enjoying the victory, concluded that being straightforward in communication wasn't so bad, and had just borne fruit. Suddenly, there was an announcement that a new target had been added, Jessica, whose favorability level was currently equal to 0. At the end of the lecture, Michael and his neighbors left the educational building. The young people walking with him congratulated him on establishing a connection with Jessica and asked him to introduce them to her friends once they got closer. Michael replied that it was too early to talk about that. A rather rude shout made the young man turn away from the conversation. It was Greg and his henchmen, expressing their disbelief and dissatisfaction at how Michael had managed to get the contact of the university's top beauty. Michael simply replied that Greg shouldn't embarrass himself any more than he already had in the lecture hall. This statement enraged Greg, but before he could act on it, his comrades reminded him of the police warning from their last arrest, that if they got into another fight, they'd be looking at prison time. Michael was about to continue walking when a familiar voice stopped him. It was Angelica, saying she'd been waiting to meet him for a very long time. This statement from the first beauty of the Faculty of Arts shocked everyone on the street. Michael, without missing a beat, said that to compensate for making her wait, he would treat her to dinner. But the girl refused dinner and instead asked if the young man liked the way she looked in the things he had bought her. To that, Michael noted that she looked simply amazing, especially with that handbag. Veronica listened to all of this while hiding in the crowd of students, feeling jealousy and annoyance raging inside her. Meanwhile, Angelica took Michael's arm, and together, they walked away from the university, continuing their conversation and leaving behind a crowd of shocked onlookers, including Greg, who watched them literally with tears in his eyes, wondering what was wrong with him. Veronica couldn't stop her own tears either. She began asking herself many questions, including what made Angelica better than her and why Michael had chosen someone else. As the sun gradually sank lower into the horizon, Angelica suddenly stopped, turned to Michael, and showed him something she had worked on recently. It was a portrait of Michael. She explained that she had stayed up late to finish it and insisted that he take the gift, stating she wouldn't forgive him if he threw it away. The young man was shocked by such a gesture. It was the first gift he had ever received from a girl. Satisfied with his reaction, Angelica smiled sweetly and asked if he liked the portrait. For a moment, Michael just stared at the drawing, showing no emotion. But gradually, thoughts began to form in his head. He remembered the girl's previous comments about his appearance and clothes, the air kiss, and now this gift. He started suspecting that these were all just tricks to lure him in after he'd spent thousands on her. Smiling slyly, Michael concluded that he was no longer the same naive guy and wouldn't fall for these kinds of moves anymore. Angelica, observing the subtle changes in Michael's facial expression, mentally noted that he didn't look joyful at all. Finally, Michael, putting on the most indifferent expression he could, asked why he even needed this picture. His reaction completely confused the girl. She didn't know what to say. Then, Michael suddenly stepped closer and asked how she intended to pay for all the gifts he had given her. At that same moment, with a sharp movement, he snatched the portrait from her hands. With his other hand, he stopped her from grabbing it back. Indecently shortening the distance between them again, he said that he liked her more than her gift. That comment made Angelica's cheeks flush pink. She felt as though she were dissolving in the most pleasant feelings just by being near him, especially when he touched her. At that moment, the voiceover announced to Michael that +5 points had been added to the girl's disposition. But their almost embrace was suddenly interrupted. A guy rushed between them, scolding Angelica for refusing to hang out with him by using the excuse that she had a manicure appointment, when clearly, she was now hugging some other guy. He began ranting and pointing at Michael, accusing her of letting him get close only because he had money. Michael immediately recognized this behavior and realized that the angry guy was clearly a fan of Angelica. Meanwhile, Angelica, now fuming, shouted back that he was no one to her and had no right to comment on who she hugged or what she did. The situation was escalating fast, but Michael stepped in. Calmly, he introduced himself and asked the guy for his name and how long he had been trying to court Angelica. The young man replied that his name was Tommy, that he also studied at the Faculty of Arts, and that he had been trying to get Angelica's attention for more than 6 months. This immediately reminded Michael of his past self, chasing after Veronica for 3 whole years. He told Tommy his story, how he had worked 4 jobs, ate cheap food, and did everything he could just to make Veronica happy. And in the end, she still ditched him for some guy in a Mercedes. Tommy was clearly stunned by the story. It left him hopeless and disillusioned about winning over someone like Angelica. Michael reinforced his point with some friendly advice. People like that only motivate you to become better. He told Tommy to return to the dorm and forget Angelica for now. One day, she'd be chasing him. She walked up to Michael, saying Tommy was just an acquaintance and she had never considered him as a romantic interest. Michael replied coldly that he didn't care about what she had or hadn't considered in the past. Then, with a completely indifferent tone, he said she didn't respect herself or him, and began tearing up the portrait she had drawn of him. The girl stood there in complete shock as Michael tore the sheet of paper into small pieces and threw them into the air like confetti. Then, without another word, he turned around and walked away from her, saying that until she understood herself and how to treat people properly, it was better for them not to meet again. As he walked off, he thought to himself that he was very curious to see how she would react to this kind of treatment. Behind him, Angelica stood frozen, her mind flooded with memories of how kind and gentle Michael had been when they first met. No one had ever treated her with such sincere care and affection. With tears filling her eyes, she came to a painful conclusion. She really liked Michael, and now she had ruined everything. Just then, the voiceover chimed in to inform Michael that +5 points had been added to Angelica's disposition.